Now, I haven't read everything, and this is breaking news, and I hate covering breaking news because I have no way to get the information on these sort of things without actually doing the research necessary to get that information on these sort of things. And therefore, I don't like providing commentary on it. And in fact, I don't like even covering these topics unless I can be extremely well informed on this one. But since this is breaking now, let's do our best to at least talk about what's going on with this petition. And maybe we can have at least some element of an opinion formed from it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to commit to anything tonight because, again, I'm doing the research right in front of you right now on the fly. So this is the first post that I saw that had any that pertained in any way to this. Yeah, it's really small font. So let's go ahead and make this as big as I can. Here, let's zoom in on this. This is the first post. It's been, as far as I can tell, deleted. That's why you can't see any commentary on this thing. But I'll read the post, and then it contains a link to a petition that a lot of people have signed, and we'll read the petition. I'm going to probably go Ben Shapiro speed on some of this, just so we can get through this quickly. Even if this is from Danielle Thompson and the New Milford, Connecticut public page, even if you don't have a child in the high school, please read this and join together Saving Our Schools principle. This is outrageous, and the superintendent needs to be stopped. Ray Manka, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his last name. Folks in the chat, let me know if I'm mispronouncing it and try your best to spell it phonetically for me. Ray Manka is the kind of principal every school deserves. He is the kind of principal our kids deserve. He genuinely cares about all of his students. He supports all of them every day. The students love him. They see him excited about school spirit and about being involved in the community. You won't find a better man for the job. Please take a moment and sign this petition to keep him in our school, to keep him as a positive role model for our teenagers. This would be a huge loss for our kids and our community. Okay, so this is being framed as a way to save New Milford High School principal Ray Manka. So let's go to the petition that this link takes us to. Calling for the termination or resignation of Superintendent Decorpo. Wow. How about that framing, folks? There's 1,610 people that have signed, and since it's ongoing, let's go ahead and refresh the page to see exactly how many people have signed. 1,623 people. So 13 people in less than the last hour since I last refreshed this have signed on. Let's read the actual petition. Started by Brendan Farina. To the New Milford Board of Education, we, the undersigned parents of children who are attending or who have attended New Milford Public Schools and community members who share similar concerns, have composed this letter to express our dissatisfaction and vote of no confidence with the current superintendent, Alicia Decorpo. For the record, the Board of Education does not have to pass a vote of no confidence on the current superintendent. They can simply vote to terminate her. They can do that. So a vote of no confidence isn't necessary. It can just be simply a vote to terminate the current superintendent. Chances are the discussion for that vote would be happening in executive session while nobody's in the room, so that because we're talking basically about an employment negotiation. So it would be creating a material advantage for that. That the material advantage is in terms of negotiation is why they wouldn't have anybody in the room. And then they would present the decision towards the end. And if there was conversation to be had about the decision afterwards, that's when they would have that conversation. The undersigned petitioners believe that the superintendent has acted inefficiently, incompetently, and is a detriment to the New Milford public school system. Folks, let me know if you need me to zoom in on this so you guys can follow along. Based on the reasons below, we, the undersigned, are asking for a vote of no confidence in Ms. Decorpo and her ability to successfully oversee the New Milford public school system and request that she resign or be let go effective immediately. So this is calling for her termination, and here's why. Firstly, during Ms. Decorpo's 18-month tenure, we have lost Director of Facilities, IT Director, HR Director, New Milford High School Principal, Schaghticoke Middle School Principal, Interim Assistant Superintendent, Interim SMS Principal, SMS Assistant Principal number 1, Schaghticoke Middle School, SMS Assistant Principal number 2, NMHS Principal number 2. Many of these positions have left mid-year. This is not typical nor standard and is completely unacceptable. Our district is losing qualified and experienced staff. After the difficulties we have experienced during COVID and so many leadership positions leaving, our community cannot recover and see positive change in our education system. It is also imperative that during this time of ever-changing fluidity, with the highest rate of mental illness, that our children not only have role models of good faith, but work ethic as well, which is impossible if our administrators and leaders are running away or being forced out by Alicia Decorpo. Those are some lofty accusations. Secondly, the Connecticut Board of Education mandates that it is the legal responsibility of the district's Board of Education to provide transportation. In addition, the New Milford Board of Education bylaws state that the superintendent is the chief executive officer of the board. As such, Ms. Decorpo has completely failed in her legal duty. Wow, okay, now this is a serious claim. Quote, 11, provisions for reasonable and desirable student transportation to school, including students attending charter schools and magnet schools, to state vocational and state vocational agricultural, and equivalent transportation for students in grades K through 12 attending non-public, non-profit schools within school district boundaries, when the majority of the students attending the non-profit, non-public schools are residents of Connecticut. This is unacceptable, end quote. This is unacceptable for the hardworking people of New Milford who are going to work late or having to make inconvenient, costly accommodations for their children. Whereas yet, the very same people who are making accommodations where the administration has failed are also being ignored when they reach out for information. So I'm going to interject here, just real quick. If she wasn't superintendent, who would the superintendent be? And how would they have performed differently? What is the expectation in her stead? The New Milford Board of Education bylaws also state that it will, quote, seek to facilitate ongoing communication between the board and students, staff, parents, and all elements of the community, end quote. Once again, as the chief executive officer, de facto chief executive officer, Alicia Decorpo has completely neglected many of her duties as the superintendent. One of the finest examples of the neglect of her duties is when the district rolled out Power School and she removed her email from the website. In addition, it is literally impossible to leave a message for the superintendent as she does not have an extension listed, and if you do not know that Pat is her secretary, one would not know to leave a message with her voicemail. As the head of New Milford Public Schools, that is complete neglect of duty, cowardice, and not reflective of this community's values. As if to add insult to injury, it appears that Mr. Corpo only feels obligated to respond when there are others carbon copied on an email, particularly when the other person replies first. In fairness, I would imagine that Mr. Corpo's email inbox is full every morning. The Board of Education bylaws also state that the board will do what is right rather than what is popular. It also states that the, quote, goal is to improve the education of our children and advocate for them in their best interests. Board members must be working effectively together and with others in the community to successfully reach this goal, end quote. In her 18 months as superintendent, we have lost 10 administrative positions. Ms. Decorpo has completely failed in her legal duties to provide transportation for some students and has completely neglected her responsibility to the students and community. Ms. Decorpo has proven that she is unfit, incompetent, and has displayed dereliction of duties to our district. Alicia Decorpo is not the right fit to this community. It is for these reasons that the community is asking for the board to dismiss Miss Alicia Decorpo or that she resigns of her own accord. If the board fails to act on the community's request as elected officials, the community will reach out to the state and seek dissolvement of the board. Wow. Okay. So we might actually have to pull out Notepad and take some notes. So let me go ahead and do that. So we're calling for the termination of Alicia Decorpo. We're calling for, we are calling for the state to dissolve the board. If that doesn't happen, and we are suggesting that she has violated the law, and that primarily we're talking about transportation duties in terms of the specific violations of those laws and specific dereliction of duty. So that's the entire petition. Quite frankly, if I might interject, on the petition itself, There's a reason that there has been some pushback on this when it comes to Facebook, and why I am on board with some of the things that people have said on Facebook that I would never, ever agree with. So first things first, we're talking about the termination of a superintendent. To me, if you're going to ask for somebody's job, if you're going to ask that they no longer have the means by which they could, I don't know if Alicia has any kids, but feed her children, I need to have a ridiculously high bar. As a man, if you're a man and you're signing on to this petition, and I will appeal to masculinity here, if you're a man, you don't ask for another man's job. Not without huge cause. And the fact that Alicia Decorpo is not a man in this case doesn't change the calculus on this matter. So I'm not saying that the bar hasn't necessarily been met, but I need a massive, massive bar. Like this is an off the charts bar to ask for somebody's job. If you're going to get me to sign this petition, then I need a lot. I need major dereliction of duty. Yes, there's been some pretty high turnover. I'll also point out, if I might interject, that turnover long predated Alicia Decorpo. And I'll also point out that there was endless turnover. It was a meme for years before Alicia Decorpo was brought into the position of superintendent, that the superintendent was just going to be some outsider that was going to take the money for 6 months and then leave. It was a revolving door. It was a revolving goddamn door at that position until she took over. Nobody before her had a real vested interest in the community, and therefore they just disappeared after 6 months. That's why in the course of something like 3 years, we had 4 superintendents before she signed on. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a reason to laud her, but remember that question I asked. If she's not going to be there, now we're going beyond the moral claim. Now we're going beyond the moral and ethical consideration, right? Now we're going into the practical. If she's not going to be there, who is? And this is a serious question to ask, even in context, because the history that we've seen is that the answer is nobody. The answer is that if you're going to have a revolving door in that position, then you don't have that position. Is she worse than nobody? Is she worse than the revolving door that we saw before her? This is a very serious question to ask. And I think if I'm going to be on board with calling for someone's job, then not only do I need to meet that incredibly high bar, I'm comparing her being in that position to nobody being in that position. Because that's basically what we're going to be faced with. And quite frankly, I have a feeling that this doesn't have to do with money. I have a feeling that these revolving doors that predate Alicia Decorpo, not only in that position, but in a number of administrative positions and in the teaching positions, the revolving door of employment within the New Milford Public Schools doesn't have necessarily to do with money, because it's been the same dollar amount, and Alicia Decorpo's been there for years now, and everyone else was just leaving right away. And it might be that revolving door that's causing people at the higher ends to just leave, right? So the other thing to point out here is I really hope that, since we're talking about the transportation duties, I really hope that's not the only reason. I really hope that's not the only rationale. Because it's her job to basically negotiate the contracts with the transportation companies that have the licensure and legal authority to actually do what they do. And unfortunately for us, there's one company in town that can do it. One. First Student. That's it. I don't even know who the other options are across the state. But there's a reason that we sign these contracts with these bus companies that we do. And that's unfortunately because what other option do we have? Right? Who is she supposed to go to serve these transportation needs? And if First Student isn't providing adequate transportation, and I would need some real metrics on that matter, then like what is she supposed to do? Where is her fault in this agreement? Should she have not signed that agreement and gone with nobody? Because from what I can tell of things, that's where we would be, with nobody. Now, as the crazy libertarian in the room, I'm completely in agreement with the folks on Facebook who have been saying, hey, this is what we've been talking about with homeschooling. This is what we've been talking about with public schools. I don't think that the problems that this bus company has experienced are not a reflection of what's been happening across the state. Every bus company can't find bus drivers. Every one of them. And there's reasons for that go beyond money. Absolutely. There's something I can't talk about, right? There's something I can't talk about because we're streaming to YouTube and Facebook where they have an editorial standard. But there's a certain thing that doesn't have to do with money, which is why so many people won't take these new jobs and left in the first place, and why these vacancies are there in the first place. It doesn't count for all of them, but it counts for a good chunk, right? So not only are we talking about termination of Alicia Decorpo, but if we're talking about going over the head of the Board of Education here in New Milford and having the state step in, wow, is that a high bar? Wow, is that a high bar? This to me sounds like hijacking. Like, first things first, I can't get on board with this petition as is, just because I would need a lot more information, number one, and number two, I would need that information to pile up in favor of one side of this discussion. Maybe that information exists, I'm not seeing it, right? So I would need a lot more information and would have to stack up very heavily in favor of one thing. And quite frankly, in terms of dissolving the Board of Education over this decision, the word petty comes to mind. And let me talk about petty, right? What would petty be? I was, as you guys know, the contractor. My company, Taylor Media, was the contractor that was at one point handling the live broadcast and recordings and the distribution of the Board of Education's meetings for about half a year. And then that relationship was severed. And that relationship was severed almost entirely by Ms. Decorpo. Now, quite frankly, considering how little our contract was and how little that agreement amounted to and what was involved with all that, she should not be wasting any more than 30 seconds of her time on that decision. And if 30 seconds of her time on that decision was, no longer Mike, we're going to hire somebody else. Fine. You know what would be incredibly petty of me? To say, I know I can provide a better service. I can prove I can provide a better service. I have been providing a better service than what you're getting and for less money. And I know that this was motivated by something other than most efficient, fulfillment of her duties as superintendent. I could say that, but why would I? Why would I? This is business. I don't care what her decision was. Her decision was to go someone else, and you move on. It would be incredibly petty of me to be jumping on board with this because of whatever personal or business disagreements she and I have had. And it's a question if we've even really had a disagreement on this matter. So that's what comes to mind when we have all of this conversation. That instead of going through the normal channels and seeing if the people who were elected into these positions, in many cases in landslides, in many cases the people that are serving on the Board of Education were elected in, statement election years, right? Like statement election years. And I'll go so far as to even name a Democrat. Tom O'Brien was elected into that position with something like 1,000 more votes than any other Democrat running in that year. That's a statement election, right? The Republicans that were elected in 2021 were elected almost 2-1 at every spot except for Tom O'Brien, who still lost by over 1,000 votes to the Republicans in the room. That's a statement election. So to me, if you guys think that if the Board of Education genuinely, honestly makes a good faith decision to retain her, then it is kind of a disgusting take to have to then overturn the result of a vote that happened less than 6 months ago, right? Or just about 6 months ago, to have the superordinate governing body come in and take over the local body, right? This whole country was founded on the notion of devolution of authority. That's why we vote. That's why we have votes, because the individuals have that decision-making when it comes to these elected officials has been devolved to the least common denominator, which is the individual. So again, if we're talking about the dissolvement of the board, that's a much higher standard. And on top of that, I would say that if we're going to talk about dissolving of the board, the decision should be made first, and then you talk about dissolving of the board. Then you talk about why they made the decision that they made. Then we talk about why it is that this principal has left New Milford Public Schools. It seems to be as the result of resignation. So let's talk to him. And in fact, what was his name? Principal Ray Manka. If anyone knows Ray Manka, if anyone knows the former principal of New Milford High School, or if he's watching, I'd love to have you on the show to get your thoughts on this whole situation. Why was it that you departed? Let's get your take on this matter. And we're not getting that from this petition. But we are getting endless commentary. So let's go over some of your folks' commentary when it comes to this petition. Again, I'm trying to get more information. I'm not presenting a decision yet, right? Like the a priori position, no, sorry, not the a priori position. The null hypothesis is that I don't sign the petition, because if the petition doesn't exist, of course, I don't sign it. I can't sign it until it exists. Then it exists. And then the decision is, do I sign it? So the hypothesis that needs to be proved is that I should sign it, not that I shouldn't sign it because I already haven't, right? That's Russell's Teapot. We've talked about this on this channel. So let's go into some more conversation on this matter. Maybe I could be convinced. I don't know. Calling for the termination or resignation of Superintendent Decorpo, which was shared by Aiden Cole, again, to this public New Milford, Connecticut page just a few days ago. We can go into, Christina Owens' defense of Superintendent Decorpo. And I'd love to get into the commentary in just a minute here, but let's read what she has to say. Superintendent Decorpo does not deserve to be slandered and used as a scapegoat. She was handed an unbelievably difficult situation to try and mend. Fair. Should she have been able to mend it? What's a reasonable expectation for her in terms of mending it? That doesn't happen overnight, and all of you whining that she should be able to, quote, fix the bus issue, end quote, or she's, quote, the reason all the good teachers leave, end quote. She's not in charge of the bus company. So how is she supposed to force them to keep bus drivers or keep up with turnover in that company? Fair question. And the teachers leaving, they are allowed to. So what if they were your favorite teacher? That seems a bit dismissive. They are allowed to come and go as they please. And if some get terminated, there's a reason for that. In fairness, that's true. That's true. The union contracts make it virtually impossible to fire somebody for cause at New Milford Public Schools. So if they get terminated, they screwed up bad. All you entitled Karens need to sit down and STFU. Unless you want to get a job at the bus company or go back to school to become an educator and be a solution to the issue, shut up and sit down. You aren't fixing the problem by blaming our superintendent for something she literally has no control over. Again, this is fair commentary. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scroll through some of the commentary. The first link I showed you folks, I'm not going to be able to go scroll through the commentary because it doesn't exist. It seems like somebody deleted that post. Okay, so let's just go to the comments that have gotten kind of a lot of responses on this matter. Where's Reed's comment? That's too bad. Reed's comment got deleted by the other post getting deleted. So let's read the responses from Christina Owens' defense. I really like this one from Ricardo Lathers, who I usually like, whose responses are usually like anyways. If we got rid of schools and parents taught their kids most likely doing a better job at it, also, we wouldn't have these issues. Defund schools, but then again, parents teaching kids that can't even navigate a roundabout doesn't sound so well. So yeah, again, this is kind of the case that I've been making, the libertarian case that I've been making for homeschooling and the weaknesses of public schooling in general. Here's another response that could be the case, but again, I need to see evidence of that fact. Jean Marie, or maybe she has control over situations and is making poor decisions. Again, this is fair. This is fair. But if she's making those poor decisions, number one, it has to amount to a pretty high standard before someone else calls for her termination. If I have an employee and I want to terminate them in landscaping, I just terminate them. Done. It's over with. Not much thought put in the matter. It was your first day of work and you showed up 2 hours late. Goodbye. You're fired. Right? Or it was your second day of work and you called in sick. And it was your third day of work and you came in 2 hours late and you clearly weren't sick. I saw you driving around. I saw you at O'Connor's last night. You're fired. Goodbye. Or, you show up to work high. Sorry, you're fired. But from the outside looking in, you don't ask for someone else's job unless you've met a colossal threshold. And honestly, I don't know if we have actually met that threshold. 73 likes and hearts. This is from Heidi Price. Here's the thing, Christina. When you take on a role like that, she is basically the manager or CEO of her company. Her job is to have skilled, competent employees, foster a good, healthy work environment, mitigate turnover, produce results. Actually, that's like her only job. In this case, successful, academically nourished children, and subsequently make her clients or customers, in this case, the parents, no, in this case, the taxpayers, are pleased with the above. No, the people paying the bill are the taxpayers. Those are the customers. I mean, let's be real. Our education system is just that, a business these days. Well, it doesn't run like one at all, but go ahead. In any other field, she would be fired by now for literally not checking any of these boxes. Again, I want to know how that's the case, right? What exactly has been taking place? Maybe I'm uninformed. Inform me. She has administrators leaving repeatedly. Again, this turnover predates her, including ones that saw the future of their careers here in New Milford till retirement because they aren't given the support they need, whatever that means. So let me know what that means. She has unruly kids that are not being disciplined in appropriate manners. It's 2022. No one's being disciplined in appropriate manners, in my opinion. And she has a community, not one or two bitching Karens, that feel she is failing their children. And while the bus problems aren't directly related to she personally, aka drivers, to her personally, aka driver shortages, the lack of timely communication is something she should be in control of. The fact that we were short bus drivers and borrowing from other districts that have their S together pre-pandemic is her problem to fix. She is at the helm of this ship. She should be guiding it versus sinking it. I think over 1,500 signatures on a petition speaks volumes as to the lack of leadership in our district and the the decline and decay of our school district that people are sick of. Okay, we actually have to speak to that last part. 1,500 signatures on a petition. How many signatures go the other way? Where's the petition to keep Superintendent Decorpo? How many people think this is a way overreaching the issue? How many people are seeing only this side of the discussion and saying, yeah, I'm on board because I'm only seeing this side of the conversation? This is squeakiest wheel gets the grease policy, and I reject it entirely, and so should you. Squeakiest wheel policy is whoever comes and presents versus whoever isn't there to come and present. We're only going to hear they're going to be the squeakiest wheel, so they get the thing. That's just not how this should work. What that results in, what that will always decay to, what that will always dissolve into is playground rules where the biggest, most obnoxious bully in the room gets his, her, or their way. And that's just not the way this should be done. Remember what I keep saying about how our elected officials in town are elected ostensibly on value judgment. They shouldn't be elected to be held hostage by what could well be a minority. 1,500 voters. If you got 1,500 votes for town council, in 2021, you were nowhere near getting elected. You were dead last place by a lot in what was a statement year election. So perhaps there are 3,500 other people going the other way on this, but there's no way to know that. There's no way to capture that in this petition. All that we're getting is a lot of people who have chimed in to say one side of the story and not a whole lot the other way. Jeffrey Rondini, she should be let go immediately. And then, okay, so I think this is actually in favor of her staying. Michelle Conley Fisher, very mature, and I'm not sure, but I don't believe people were complaining about their favorite teacher leaving. I think everyone understands they're allowed to leave, but there have been several administrators leaving under her watch than ever before. So I guess this is sarcasm. I guess this is not in defense of Alicia Decorpo. So again, I'm just going basically to the most liked comments because they, this is at least giving some insight to the thing. Okay, here we go. Now as we get down the comment section, we get to some more defenses of Alicia Decorpo. Michael, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce Eastern European names. Modern day witch trials. There's no proof that she's at fault for all of the issues with transportation and retention, but that doesn't prove anything, so we should just get rid of her. Don't know what that face means. Melanie, again, Eastern European last name. Sorry, folks, I can't pronounce them. Lichvink. Sorry, I'm not going to be able. I'm going to screw it up. I am not surprised that a town full of people who complain yearly about how much we budget for the BOE are now complaining because teachers and admin are leaving for better jobs. Again, this idea that money resolves all problems and that the only decision making that's going on here is how much do I get paid, and if I make $1 more, I'm moving across the country. That's just not a reflection of reality when it comes to decisions relating to taking on jobs. There were some other comments I wanted to get into here. Unfortunately, okay. So here's another one in defense of Decorpo. Again, I'm not cherry picking the ones that are in defense of her. It's just we've gotten a lot going one way, so I'm trying to pick through all of this stuff. John Krapinski. All the parents sitting home complaining should take one day of driving the bus and the problem would be solved. Fair. Actually, that's kind of fair. Peter Smith, John Krapinski, that's a great idea. I have friends in North Carolina whose school district has paras drive the buses. Way to catch up with solutions. See, now, this is something I actually like, because instead of complaining, and you guys have seen me speak at town council before, I don't like to complain when I don't have a solution. And this seems to me to be, even if it's being presented sarcastically, I'm on board. Let's reduce the licensure requirements to become a bus driver, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to become a bus driver. Okay, so we have a factual claim. Okay, no, this is not really what we're going for. Let's see. This one has 8. This one has 8 likes. So let's see what Dan Bremen has to say. Instead of worrying about buses, y'all should be worried about the children in this school district. Seems like a large portion of youth have suicidal tendencies and beginning stages of chemical dependencies before stepping foot in high school. But hey, let's blame the buses and superintendent for that. But hey, I'll STF you now and continue to ignore the elephant in the room. By the way, whoever posted should really avoid using coin terms like Karen. Makes your argument a bit harder to agree with when you sound like a preteen throwing a temper tantrum. There's something actually to this, right? Like, the single best predictor, we've gone over the data on the show. I have an entire video on this matter. The single best predictor for educational outcomes in public schools K through 12, by far, is parental involvement, right? And that the conditions which affect educational outcomes greatest extend way beyond the 4 walls of the classroom and well into the home. We've talked about this on this channel. There is something to the idea that a lot of these problems that are probably larger problems aren't even happening though they're happening among school-age children, aren't really happening as a result of what's happening in school, but what's happening in the home. So that is a fair point to bring up. Let's see what you guys have had to say in the commentary. Thanks for everyone who's been joining in. Wow. Okay. So I guess I have to zoom out so I can actually read what's going on here. Okay, Ray Lillis is late to the party, but he's here as always. Thanks, Ray, for watching. Paul Murphy's watching. Thanks, Paul, for watching. Walter O'Connor. In case you don't get to it, Superintendent Decorpo is the best of the last 5 superintendents I interacted with. So folks know at home, Walter O'Connor is the director of the Board of Finance, so he interacts with the superintendent of schools on a very regular basis, especially when it comes to building the budget, so that he stays well informed and apprised of everything going on. Danny C. Facts. Rebecca Rebillard, which, God, I'm so bad at pronouncing last name. Sorry, folks. There's a lot of districts looking for superintendents this year. It would be hard to fill. Ray Lillis, at least hold the bus company accountable. Fair. I'm not sure what that means or how you would go about that, but fair. Danny C., are they even New Milford residents? I think based on the names I'm seeing that these people that are complaining and are putting this together are New Milford residents. As far as the petition itself is concerned, it's impossible to say who's been signing it are a bunch of New Milford residents, largely because with the online version of these petitions, which is why I have on paper versions, which have names and addresses, so that you can see that they're from New Milford. And that's why I do that. There is a way in the online version of these petitions, especially on change.org, to have anonymous signatories of these petitions. Okay, so this is from Karen. I'm so bad at pronouncing names. I'm so sorry, folks. This is from Karen Muir Lima. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing names. Hey, I'm Karen, and I've been saying this all along. I don't know why everyone thinks they can handle and do everyone else's job better, and all they do is sit around and complain about the ones who are trying to do their jobs. My favorite Karen has spoken. It's funny that her name is Karen in this situation. So this seems to be in defense of Alicia Decorpo. Come to the Board of Ed. Kelly Ryan Murphy, come to the Board of Ed meeting Tuesday, 426, Sarah Noble School. Yeah, so Tuesday night, there is going to be a Board of Education meeting at Sarah Noble in the library, as they always hold their meetings. I don't know that we're really going to get more. I don't know that we're really going to get more information on this issue. It seems to me, okay, here we go. Here's Walter O'Connor's commentary. I was actually looking for this. Walter O'Connor, as a member of the Board of Finance, I've interacted with the Board of Education and at least 5 superintendents over the last 6 years. Our current superintendent has been by far the best one. Anthony Pearburn responded, one can be both pleasant during interactions and incompetent in day-to-day activities. Fair. Anthony, that is a fair response. And again, I might be ill-informed on all this matter. The only thing that I'm going to say as we kind of wrap things up here, because we're getting way over on time. First things first, thanks for everyone who's joined in. I'd love to get everybody's thoughts on this matter. I'd love to get the former principal of New Milford High School, Ray Manka, on. If anyone knows him, please reach out to him. Please give him my information here on Mike Sennello Show, and have him reach out to me. I'd love to hear his take on why he left. It seems to have been a resignation rather than a termination. I can't say one or the other for sure. If that's the case, seems to be the case. Again, I can't sign this petition right now. I just can't. We're not only calling for somebody's job, we're doing it on kind of limited grounds here. We're not saying we're not saying something along the lines of checks aren't getting caught for the teachers, right? We're not saying something along the lines of, the superintendent shredded the transportation contract and spent 6 months sitting on her hands while there was no way to get kids to school in any reasonable manner, right? It isn't anything that serious. It isn't, some sort of major violation of the law necessarily, like diddling kids, let's say, God forbid. But again, we're asking for somebody's termination. And we're not just asking for somebody's termination. We're asking for a very high-ranking official's termination. We're asking for the Board of Education superintendent. We're at New Milford Public Schools superintendent, Alicia Decorpo's, either resignation or termination by the Board of Ed. And on top of that, we're asking for basically the dissolution of the Board of Education if they don't terminate her on Tuesday night. That seems insane. That seems, again, like what we're looking at here is not a rational response to what might be going on. For all those folks who have been saying that SMS is an S show, by the way, because I've seen some of that commentary, Scotticoke Middle School has always been an S show. I last attended Scotticoke Middle School in the 90s. In the 90s, Scotticoke Middle School was an S show. And that's because the kids of that age group are bastards. Quite frankly, I know because I was one. I know because I was there, right? And that's been the case for 30 years. So if we're going to say that SMS is a S show, then we need way more information than that. We need exact specifics as to what makes this S show, and especially S show, compared to prior years. I want to know, when we've had 2 years of COVID, where we've had the state constantly changing things like masking policy and constantly changing things like what are the conditions that allow for kids to be in the classroom versus not, constantly changing vaccination policy for both the teachers and the visitors and the parents and the students. When we have things like regulation coming from outside of Alicia's control, just constantly changing things. When we constantly have turnover in the IT department because of, I'll say it, I've talked to one of the IT directors and why they were leaving. A lot of them were saying that their emails were just constantly being bombarded by utterly ridiculous requests from parents who just have no patience whatsoever and have no capacity to understand that when it comes especially to IT, things like going from entirely in-person student classrooms to entirely virtual classrooms in 3 days, you're not going to like the result. Period. When the state comes in and says you have to go virtual, you have to shut down, it's going to take a year to replace that. It's going to take a year of everybody stay home, homeschool your kids while we figure this out, to go from nothing to fully virtual in a way that's actually going to result in real learning, in a way that's going to actually allow for parents to find some way to manage the daily, day-to-day care of their kids. This is a garbage situation to walk into. And yes, Alicia Decorpo did walk into it. And yes, it's her job to walk into these garbage dumpster fire situations, the New York Jets of the last 20 years, right? and fix those problems. What is a reasonable expectation of outcomes in that situation? What is a reasonable expectation of what things should look like now versus if somebody else was in her stead? How would somebody else have done things differently that would have been a major and obvious improvement in things? Now, my take is I preferred a superintendent who had gigantic watermelon balls and would have said to the Board of Ed and said to the state, we're going to just ignore the state guidelines and we're going to just keep everybody in the classroom and let the kids do what the kids need to do. If the kids want to wear masks, they can wear masks. If the parents want their kids vaccinated, they can go get them vaccinated. If the parents want to pull their kids out of the schooling system like they did in droves in 2020 and in 2021 and seem to be continuing to do over in 2022, not just in New Milford, but across the country and especially in Connecticut, and enter them into either private schooling or homeschooling, go ahead. Go ahead. Right? We've seen the age striations when it comes to COVID transmission and outcomes. Parents can make decisions. The single best predictor for educational outcomes is parental involvement. And yes, the last 2 years, I think we're going to look back on this and say, man, we have irreparably damaged an entire generation of kids because of the way we have generally treated COVID in the classroom. And I don't think that the way Alicia Decorpo has handled that in reflection to that, it's not the way I would have done it, but I don't know who that superintendent is that would have had the brass balls to do what I would want them to do, which is, middle finger to the state, middle finger to the Board of Education, middle finger to the health department. We're putting the kids back in class. Deal with it. Deal with it. And we're not wasting time and money in these virtual classrooms where nobody's doing any learning. But the thing is that in these virtual classrooms, there isn't any learning going on in Brookfield. There isn't any learning going on in New Fairfield. There isn't any learning going on in the Chippewa district. There isn't any learning going on in these virtual classrooms across the state because they're virtual classrooms, right? How on earth are you supposed to expect a 6-year-old to learn from 8 hours in front of a screen? It's just not happening. It's just not happening. What are the things a 5-year-old needs to learn when it comes to their education? Honestly, a handful of ABCs, a handful of 1, 2, 3s, and social interactions. What is appropriate? What is an appropriate way to act around other people? And you can't replicate that in the virtual classroom. When it comes to coming back to the classroom, what are the things that those 5-year-olds need to learn? They need to learn to enunciate and speak. They need to learn the basics of the English language, which is really tough to do with muffled speech and with mouths you can't see. There are a lot of kids that are going to be irreparably damaged as a result of that, but this really isn't necessarily specific to Alicia. If I was superintendent, yes, things would have been radically different. Also, I would have violated the law in doing that, and I would have been fired. So I don't know who it is that we would have replaced Alicia Decorpo with to meet the standard and the expectations that are being set. And I don't even know what those expectations are. So I'd love to hear from the community on this matter. I'd love to get more information on this matter. Let me know what you guys think on this whole thing. Well, quite frankly, I am not at a threshold now where I can sign this petition. I am not at a threshold where I would be asking for somebody's job and their career and their livelihood over what we've seen complaints about. And the fact of the matter is, it's really easy to call for somebody's termination. It's really easy to get people on board with a petition to call for somebody else's job. It's much harder to find the person that's going to be there better. It's much harder to say, this is the person we want long-term and they're definitely going to be better. And for God's sake, if we're asking for the state to intervene in all this, in a country whose whole system of governance was built around devolution, man, there better be a war breaking out. And we're not there.